Hello beautiful people, Stephanie here, and today we're going to take a look at the basics of getting started with improvisation. Improvisation on tin whistle should be easy, but whether you're creating a melody for yourself from home, trying to hit that killer solo in the middle of a song, or trying to add some accompaniment to some existing music, it can be really difficult to know where to start and know how to progress with your improvisation. Well, today I'm going to show you a little trick that might make things easier. It does require a little bit of music theory knowledge, but if you don't have any, don't worry. I'm going to try and explain it in the simplest way I can, and hopefully you'll be able to pick up that tin whistle and get started with some incredible improvisations. To start with, you'll need a tin whistle in the key of D, and that's because we're actually going to be doing today's demonstration in the key of E minor, and we're going to be using something called the pentatonic scale. Now generally, tin whistles are in a major key. A D tin whistle is in the key of D major, and it's in a diatonic scale. It has a set range of notes that it can play if you cover or open the holes. So you might know that D tin whistles play D, E, F sharp, G, A, B, and C sharp as part of their scale, and they play that over 2 octaves, the lower octave and the higher octave. That gives us 14 notes to play with, and that's an awful lot of notes. In fact, that's 14 different places you can go completely wrong when you're trying to do an improvisation. So that's why today we're looking at something called the pentatonic scale. And the pentatonic scale is a distilled selection of 5 notes. It narrows the number of notes that you can play around with, and basically takes out a bunch of the errors that we can possibly make when we're trying out our first steps in improvisation. Now, before we go any further, it's worth knowing what keys your D major whistle can actually play in. Take a look at the circle of fifths that I have on screen now. A tin whistle in the key of D plays those notes we established: D, E, F sharp, G, A, B, C sharp, and then so on and so forth through the 2nd octave. If we take a look at the circle of fifths, you'll see that D is on this outside ring. The cool part about this circle of fifths is that if you can play in a major key, you can also play in its relative minor key on the inside ring on the same whistle. So you can play in the keys of D major on D tin whistle and B minor. Another cool thing about tin whistles and the circle of fifths is that you can also play in the major keys either side of the key of the whistle. You'll see that the D major whistle can also play in the keys of A major to its right and G major to its left. And even more impressively, this whistle can also play in those relative minors. That's E minor and F sharp minor as well. Who knew one little whistle could play in 6 different keys? Amazing, right? So for today's little exercise, we're going to be looking at the E minor pentatonic scale. 5 notes in the key of E minor. Those notes are E, G, A, B, and D. And I've prepared some chords to play in the background later on in this video so you can give this a try yourself. We're not using any other notes other than the E, G, A, B, and D. So let's start by just playing around with those notes. As you can hear, they sound kind of nice together. There's not much you can do to make these notes sound bad, and that is why it's the perfect place to start. So let's take a look at some of the things you can do to make sure your improvisations sound interesting. Firstly, we're going to vary the note lengths. Now, there's nothing stopping you going up and down that pentatonic scale, just playing that E, G, A, B, D, and then back down. But an improvisation is going to sound much more interesting if you vary the length of each note. Rests or pauses within the music are just as important as filling that space. So having a balance between gaps or pauses and actual notes will make your improvisation sound so much more interesting, even just going up and down the scale. It's also quite useful to find notes that sound nice in little groups. For example, we've got the run here of G, A, and B. you could group those together in the middle. So just going up and down the octave still, we'd have this. You could also run that octave up and down by doing little jumps. So we could, for example, go E, G, E, G, A, G, A, B, A, B, D, B, like this. You could also jump up and down the scales using these same notes in the second octave. So we could do the low octave E, high octave E, like this. We used the same range of notes, but jumped up the octave on the E, just to give it some added interest. So there are lots of things you can do to play around with this and really make some interesting sounds. Don't forget that once you've got some sort of basic melody, adding things like ornamentation, whether that's with your fingers or the different breath techniques you can use, will really add some interest to the way that you play. When you're playing with other musicians, knowing where to start and stop, knowing when to play and when to be quiet is one of the most difficult things. You can try and change the beat that you start your improvisation on within the music. You can try and change how long you hold those notes, how quickly you play those notes. Ideally, you want to be playing within some gaps within the music given the opportunity, but remember that you can also repeat some of the cool things you hear within the original melody as well. If you'd like some more tips and tricks on how to use tin whistle as an accompaniment instrument, I do have a dedicated video on that, which I've linked in the description down below, up here on the eye, and I will put at the end of the video as well. So now let's try with those chords that I said I'd laid out for you. And at any point, you can use any of the notes on screen on your D whistle to try some improvisations. Spend some time playing around with it and see how you get on. This section's going to give you a whole minute to try this, so if you want to carry on with the tutorial, jump forward to the next chapter. So the big question is, how do you use these techniques when you're in an actual setting? Well, firstly, you need to find out the key signature of the piece of music you're playing. Say you're playing in a session, or you're playing with a band, or you're playing with other musicians. Firstly, you can ask them what key signature the music is in. If you don't have reference to sheet music and nobody knows the key signature, you can try and work out the key signature. Let me show you how that's done. Let's start by saying you've been playing the melody of this tune on a D whistle. We already know from previously in this video that that means it's quite likely it's one of the 6 keys that we can play easily on the D whistle. D, G or A major, E, B or F sharp minor. That's a fantastic place to start. Next, take a look at the main melody. How many sharps are you playing within that melody? Are you using just 1 sharp? Are you using 2 sharps? Maybe you need to half hole and get a 3rd sharp in. Well, check the number of sharps in your main melody against the number of sharps on the outer ring of the circle of fifths. If you're using only 1 sharp, it might be worth considering that you could be playing in the key of G major. Minor keys generally sound a little bit more sad, melancholic, whereas major keys tend to be bright and happy, kind of cheerful sounding. So you can usually determine whether a song is in a major or minor key by deciding whether it makes you feel happy or sad. If it's happy sounding, we can guess that we're in the key of G major. Or if it's kind of sad sounding, we can guess that we're in the key of E minor. Now, this technique is never going to be 100%, but it can give you a good guess at the key signature you're working in, and then all you need to do is look up the pentatonic scale in that particular key. If you've worked out that the key signature is a major scale, it's quite simple to work out which notes to play. You skip the 4th and the 7th note in the scale. So in our D major scale, 1, 2, 3, 4, and we wouldn't play G, and then we'd skip the 7th. 5, 6, 7. So we wouldn't play C sharp. So we'd play D, E, F sharp, skip the G, A, B, and skip the C sharp. If we think back to our E minor scale, with minor scales we skip the 2nd and the 6th note of the scale. But bear in mind that we do need to start from the root note, and that was the E. So for E minor we played the 1st note, skipped the 2nd, played the 3rd, 4th, 5th, skipped the 6th, and played the 7th. Like this. E, skip, G, A, B, skip, D. So the absolute best way to use this technique is choose a song that you know the key signature of and choose an appropriate whistle. Learn the notes in all those scales that whistle can play, and then remember which notes you need to skip for major keys and which notes you need to skip for minor keys to hit your pentatonic scales. Once you have all that information in your brain, you're free to play around and make some incredible improvisations. There are so many ways you can level up this kind of improvisation as well. If you have access to sheet music or notes that show you what chords are being played throughout the song, you can adjust the notes that you play based on those individual chords. And although that's going to require a lot more practice, you might be able to work something out that you could improvise for a specific song. But that is something for an entirely different video. I hope this was helpful. Please do let me know if you have comments, questions, or suggestions. Leave them down below and I'll do my best to get back to you. Don't forget, if you'd like to check out some of my other videos on improvisation or accompaniment and some of the cool things you can do, I'll put a selection on screen for you now. Save this video to watch back again. Happy whistling, and I'll see you folks again for some more tin whistle tunes very soon. Bye!